Episode 3, Managing Your State. In this episode I'm going to cover what is state, how in NLP we use state, a metaphorical description of state, my own experience of using states over the years, a case study, ways that you can change and manage your state, a number of exercises, and a summary on what's in the next episode. So in NLP, how do we use state? Well, firstly, we use words like confident, persuasive, curious, interested, playful, mischievous to describe our state. What I'd like you to consider as we start this description of states is to think about, if you were curious and interested, what impact it has on the people around you, and also what impact it has on yourself. Because depending on the state you're in, it allows you to connect with different resources within you. If you're curious and interested, you connect with a different set of resources within you than if you were bored or pissed off. If you're playful and mischievous, again, it creates a different impact on those people around you, but also it accesses different resources, different ways that you can do things from yourself. So in many ways, state is the first element in leading yourself and other people. The other important thing I'd like you to consider when we explore states is, when I was brought up, there was this idea in society that if you worked hard for 25 years and you got your house, you got your car, you got your kids an education, then you'd be happy. Now, to some extent, that's exactly the wrong way around. I'd like you to consider the idea that if you start happy, if you start motivated, then you'll actually find it much easier to attract all those things that you need to accomplish what you want. So in many ways in NLP, we basically use the idea, go for the state first, and use the states to help you as a resource on that journey for you to achieve what you want. A metaphorical description of learning about states. If you imagine you're in a rough sea, or you found yourself in a rough sea in a boat, and you didn't really know how to control it, and you came across a rudder, in relation to the storm and the roughness of the sea, a rudder is very small. But if you start to learn how to use it, while it may be tricky at first, eventually you'll be able to guide that boat into smoother and much more pleasant seas. And in a curious way, it's a bit like this when you start managing state. At first it may seem a little bit alien, something you haven't necessarily been brought up to do. But as you start managing it, the more you play with it and the more you explore it, you find you can't necessarily quell the rough seas around you, but what you can do is learn to navigate to much better places. So what's my own experience of using states? Firstly, when I did my first NLP practitioner course, the guy taking it wasn't particularly good at managing his state, insofar as before any part of the course, he would go through a mild panic in getting ready for the course. And when I learned about states initially, I learned it in a sort of intellectual way. It was sort of a little bit theoretical, rather than actually me being in connection with my state, with my emotions. However, as I started doing NLP, I found that I was able to do one thing that was very important. By imagining myself in a useful state sometime in the future, I actually found, almost to my surprise, that some things that in the past would have been quite difficult, that I just clicked into the right state at the right time, and therefore I performed much better than I would have done otherwise. And so I found actually playing with states and rehearsing states, as I say, at a time in the future, actually started enabling me to generate much better results. I then explored a bit of meditation, and then, curiously enough, I found that meditation was the exact opposite of what I thought. Instead of it sort of being relaxing and sitting still and all that sort of stuff, because you get yourself to sit still, you become much more aware of any thoughts or feelings that you have in your body. And I actually found it really uncomfortable to start. I actually started with a minute, and then I did 2 minutes, and eventually I got up to 15 minutes and 20 minutes. And although at first I didn't find it actually comfortable doing it, I found, again to my surprise, that the rest of the day when I wasn't meditating, I was actually much calmer, much more creative, much more balanced, much more grounded. And I found the whole process was a very good discipline in almost accepting whatever was going on with my state at that time, but actually creating a situation where I was in much better states for the rest of the time. So having had that experience with a bit of future pacing, with a bit of meditation, I then went back and re-looked at all the NLP stuff on states. And this time I threw myself in and did it physically. It wasn't intellectual anymore. It was me just doing it. And I found I got tremendous benefit from it. So my suggestion to you is, do the exercises at the end of this episode. And even if they don't work 100% first time, do keep on practicing them. Because when you found the way to do them that works for you, you will have developed a resource that is really, really useful to you. Let's look at a case history. A client of mine who had a very successful consultancy business dealing with high-powered lawyers was suddenly finding that she really enjoyed working with these guys, but she began to get really nervous about doing presentations to them. And she had to do presentations to them because that's how she got business. And it was actually getting to the stage where she was having nightmares because she was just getting more and more frightened of doing these presentations. And as these things happened, the more frightened she got, the more they used to be cynical towards her or pick on her or make comments, which of course made it worse. So she came to me and we had a few chats about it. And so what I did was, I thought, well, let's explore what sort of states would be useful for her to be able to present well to these guys. And we considered all sorts of things, from being a bit mischievous to being playful to being ultra professional. And we then said, well, let's have a bit of fun. Let's go back in her history to find a time, or see if we could find a time where she dealt with similar sorts of people, but actually did it totally fearlessly and with a certain amount of fun. And curiously enough, it was as though the scales fell away from her eyes, because she realized when she was in her own early 20s and she was flirting a bit with blokes, she went in with the attitude to test them. That it wasn't a question of whether she was good enough for them, it was simply a question of were they good enough for her. And she immediately realized that if she started to present these alpha male lawyers with that attitude of, are these people good enough for me to work with, she found her whole attitude changed. And the very next day when she gave a presentation, she found that the doubt and fears that she had were completely lost, and she really enjoyed it. The net result of that was she was able to do more presentations, she got more business, and she was genuinely good at working with them, so her business went from strength to strength. It's just a demonstration how a small bit of state management and a small amount of work done on state at the right time can make a huge difference. So how can we change our states? Well, basically, it tends to boil down to 5 approaches, although from this 5, you can pick a mix and make lots more variations. First one is using your memories and imagination. If you remember a time when you were in a really positive state, and you remember what you saw, you remember what you heard, you remember how you felt, where you felt it, how you knew you felt it, and any tastes or smell, each time you bring an element of the memory back, it tends to strengthen all the memories. And so by going through what you see, what you hear, how you feel, taste and smell, you're able to bring that state from the past back into the present and use it into the present. So the way you use your memories and imagination are a very good way of managing your state in the present. The next one is using your physiology and breathing. There is a relationship between our mood and how we hold our bodies and how we breathe. And curiously enough, these days if somebody is a little bit depressed, often doctors will get them to go and do exercise, because if you keep moving your body, if you keep stretching, if you keep a certain rhythm of your body, if you keep changing your posture, it forces you to move your posture, and therefore you're likely to lose bad feelings. So by remembering our postures when we're feeling good, by remembering how we breathe, how we hold our shoulders, where we focus our attention, gives us a way of managing our state. The third way is by asking questions. Now, questions don't change state in themselves, but questions can lead people into a direction where they think of bad states or good states. If somebody says, "Why do you keep messing that up?" you're actually getting them to think about bad states. It tends to put them into a bad state. If you say to somebody, "Look, how can we make this work and get some fun out of it?" you're tending to get them to think about things that will put them in a good state. So it's another way to think about questions. Often we want to ask questions because we want information, and that's fine. But sometimes we want to ask questions because they will lead people into good, and for other people, sometimes bad states. While we're talking about questions, be gently cautious about keep asking why, because often continual use of the why questions tends to take people into a less than useful state. The fourth way of changing state is through our beliefs. Viktor Frankl did a lot of work with people that had been in concentration camps, and a conclusion he came to very strongly was the guys that had strong beliefs, the guys that could put a purpose to what they were doing, tended to survive, whereas the people that didn't have a purpose tended to die very quickly. Now, this might be overstating it, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. If you're going through a time that temporarily is a little bit bad, if you can put a meaning behind it, if you can realize that by going through this slightly bad patch, you are preparing yourself for the future, then it can put you into a much more positive frame of mind. Therefore, it's always worth thinking, if you're in a place that isn't necessarily a place that you want to be, it's always worth thinking if you can find a genuine purpose for it. Also, in a later episode, we're going to be talking about outcomes. If you have a big, bold outcome or purpose, then it will naturally give you state resources which will be able to help you overcome anything that might otherwise get in your way. And the last thing I want to mention is letting go and meditation. Meditation is almost a way about acceptance. It's almost sitting there and saying, the world is the world, and that is okay. So you're not fighting the world, you're working with it. And one of the advantages of that is, by accepting, you're almost working with whatever is around you. So you're not putting any energy into fighting the world. And therefore, all your energies and resources are being used for what you want to achieve. And in many ways, what an ideal position to be in is when you accept what is now and still have an exciting, big goal for the future. Because then you're almost in a perfect situation. A summary and what's next. State is one of the most important parts of NLP, and it's worth spending a bit of time exploring it for yourself and finding out what works for you. and playing with things and changing them and playing with them again, as I say, until you find out what really works for you. Something I'd ask you to think about is start noticing those people around you, those people that do influence others. How do they use states, and what states actually cause an impact with the people around them? When you start doing that, you really will begin to notice how strong a part state plays in influence. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. The next episode we're going to be exploring how to set big, bold, exciting goals. And being in the right state will make that much, much easier. Thank you for watching and listening. Look forward to seeing you there.